Hello, everyone. It's Sherry with the CGH Health Foundation, and welcome to our July Growing Healthier program. Our Growing Healthier programs educate you about important health topics, and it also gives us the opportunity to introduce you to some of our outstanding providers at CGH. Dr. Bird's guest today is Dr. Matthew Wolf, who is a family medicine provider in our Morrison and Prophetstown clinics. And Dr. Wolf also has an interest in gerontology, which is medicine practice that involves people of an advanced age. And so he has some information that he's going to share with us today, particularly about falling, and that should be really interesting. Next month's program will be on Thursday, August 22nd, and our speakers that month will be Dr. Jeffrey Thormeyer and Dr. Sean Hanlon, our orthopedic surgeons at CGH, and they have been doing hip and knee replacements with the Mako Smart Robotic System. We're the only hospital in the area to be offering that technology, and I know that they're real excited to come and tell you more about that. I just want to remind you about the CGH Health Foundation's annual campaign, and our emphasis this year is on our oncology services, on our women's health program, and on our dementia services. So your donations help to provide some really important resources to our patients who are dealing with those situations. If you want to contribute to our campaign, all you do is send your donation to the CGH Health Foundation at 100 East Lefevre Road in Sterling, or you can go to the CGH website and look for the Health Foundation page there. And I know Dr. Bird's waiting out there in the wings. He's ready to talk to Dr. Wolf, and so I will go ahead and turn it over to you, Dr. Bird.
Thank you, Sherry. Appreciate it. Thanks for the lead in. Welcome, everyone. This is Dr. Bill Bird, Chief Medical Officer at CGH Medical Center in Sterling, Illinois. Thank you for taking the time to watch our program today. Program today is about falls. I know it's not a particularly sexy topic, but it's pretty important and pretty big deal. And I have a pretty big deal to introduce you to, and that is Dr. Matt Wolf. Dr. Wolf, let's get you on here. Hi, Dr. Wolf.
Hi, Dr. Bird. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well.
Good.
Okay, so Dr. Wolf practices in Morrison, Illinois, at our satellite in Morrison, and sees a fair number of patients who deal with this issue. So
Absolutely.
Without further ado, because I know Dr. Wolf has other patients to see once we get done here, let's talk about falls. So my first question for you, Matt, is this. How big a deal are falls in the U.S.?
That's a good question, Bill. Falls are a very, very big deal here in the U.S. We see this both kind of through our statistics that the government collects on falls, as well as just in our own medical practice. Last year, by some studies, over 25% of adults over the age of 65 had at least one fall. That's even more impressive when you figure that 5 to 10% of falls lead to serious complications, and about 5% of falls actually lead to hospitalization. And it's like I tell my patients all the time, we really like to keep people out of the hospital as best we can, because anytime somebody gets put in the hospital, that has other complications as well. So if you figure that 25% of people have a fall and 5 to 10% get serious complications, that's a pretty big number that end up having problems with that. Also, you figure when you fall, you have increased risk of things like hip fractures. And a lot of people who have hip fractures end up never really recovering to their baseline. It's a pretty big range, but it's estimated that 25 to 75% of individuals who fall down and have a hip fracture will never recover their original baseline and functional status. Also, for people, even if you don't break a hip, who fall and have what's called a long lie, where basically they're unable to get themselves up, over 35% of those individuals will never recover their functional status that they had before the fall. And then we obviously see more problems from people who do have that long lie. We see things like muscle breakdown, rhabdomyolysis. These are things that can cause kidney problems. So it becomes a very, very big issue. Also, it's estimated that falls in individuals over the age of 65 are actually the 5th leading cause of death, which I think is pretty surprising when you think about all the diseases that we have. So that's a pretty impressive statistic.
Mm-hmm.
And then furthermore, anecdotally, we love our numbers and our statistics, but anecdotally in our family practice, I think if you ask any family practice doctor who sees individuals who are of a certain age, we'll all have many stories of some patients who fell and were never able to regain their independence after a fall. So those always really stick with us on a personal level. So it's really important that we try to prevent these falls as best we can.
Yeah, very helpful to hear all that, Matt. Let me ask you this: what has to happen in our bodies for our bodies for us to stand up and walk? Just what does it take?
Oh, that is a really interesting question. A lot more than most people think. I once had a friend, I think, while they were in college, they had to write a 5-page essay on what your body does to shoot a free throw. So I'll try to give you the abridged version. But on a high level, obviously your body has a lot of coordinated movements that it has to do. You have to engage the muscles of your legs. Normally, people will also use the muscles of their arms, muscles of their core. And most people would imagine that's pretty obvious. But also, your body has to regulate its own blood pressure. It has to be able to sense itself in space, something we call proprioception. It takes vision. If you're going to actually walk, our vision has to be in order. Our vestibular function has to work properly. So it's a very complex task for our brains to do the things that we take for granted every day.
Yeah. So when people fall, something about that process isn't working quite right.
Absolutely.
Are there any common themes in terms of ways that our bodies begin to not work the way they should that cause us to fall or begin to fall?
Absolutely. There basically can be an abnormality of one or several organ systems. I often tell my patients a lot of times it's a little bit of a lot of things. You get a little bit of a problem with several different organ systems. I'll give you some examples.
Sure.
Our musculoskeletal system obviously changes as we get older. We tend to lose muscle mass. So by losing muscle mass, it can make it more likely that we fall. Also, interestingly enough, our musculoskeletal system can act differently. When they've looked at this, older individuals, when they try to balance, they tend to use more large muscle systems. So the proximal, or basically proximals towards the middle, they're proximal muscles when they try to balance, whereas younger individuals tend to use more distal and they have more fine motor movements there. So it actually helps the younger people stay balanced a little bit better. Our sensory systems get a little bit worse. Sometimes our vestibular system in our inner ear, we lose hair cells, we lose neurons there sometimes, so they don't send those balance signals to our brain quite as well, and that can lead to balance issues and can lead to falls. Also, with the neurologic system, our vision can end up having problems. Our hearing can have problems, which plays a role as well. And so when we don't have those sensory inputs, that can really increase our risk of falling or can lead to a fall. Cognitive impairment can do it. Certain memory issues make falls more likely. Certain neurologic conditions certainly make it more likely, like Parkinson's disease and any one of a number of other neurologic conditions. Our cardiac system can have problems. We have what are called baroreceptors in our cardiovascular system that are supposed to sense changes in blood pressure. And it turns out our brain really likes to have blood get to it. And if our cardiovascular system doesn't sense
that works, yeah.
Yeah, it does. If our cardiovascular system doesn't sense that by increasing our heart rate when we stand up, then a lot of times the blood pressure will drop. And that drop in blood pressure can make us dizzy, and obviously dizziness makes us fall. Our joints, arthritis increases our risk of fall. A lot of patients who have arthritis will say their knees give out on them, and obviously can make them fall. So any one or a number of those different organ systems not quite acting how they were designed to can certainly certainly lead to a fall.
Yeah. Very helpful. So let me ask you this then. When you talk to patients, Matt, what are some things that you encourage them to do from a body standpoint to reduce their risk of falling?
Yeah, absolutely. That's really kind of the most important part of the issue. I tell people, I don't think I've ever had somebody argue with me that falls are bad. So that stuff comes
Right.
pretty obvious. But the real question, you're right, Bill, is what do we do about it? So the first thing I always tell my patients is make sure you have good, well-fitting footwear. It's interesting. The studies really can't agree on what is necessarily the best type of footwear for this. There are some studies that say good hard sole shoes are the best. There are other studies that say, no, the athletic footwear, things like tennis shoes, are the best. But one thing they can all agree on is that going barefoot or in your socks is certainly the worst.
Okay.
So don't go barefoot. Don't just go in your socks. Good form-fitting shoes that are reasonably comfortable certainly can help with falls. Modifying your home can certainly help. Doing environmental things that can keep you free of obstructions and things like that. Limiting your alcohol intake is really important. People who have higher rates of alcohol use do tend to fall more. This is exacerbated as we get a little bit older. So that is a good thing too, limiting that. There is some good evidence that taking vitamin D can help, but an important thing is only if you're vitamin D deficient. As you know, most of us in primary care, we get a lot of our recommendations from the United States Preventive Services Task Force, and they kind of piggybacked on this too and said in individuals who are vitamin D deficient, vitamin D is helpful. In individuals who are not vitamin D deficient, there really hasn't been shown to be a link, but certainly an individual who's vitamin D deficient, go ahead and take your vitamin D. Make sure your hearing and your vision are good. If you haven't had an eye exam recently, get a good eye exam. If the eye doctor tells you you need corrective lenses, please wear them. Same thing with your hearing. If you think, boy, I'm just not hearing as good as I should, have that discussion with your physician, and they'll be kind enough to get you an audiology appointment, and then they can talk to you about different things they can do, hearing aids and things like that. Getting them's not good enough too. If you have them, please wear them. It really work a lot better in your ears than in the bottom.
That way, yeah.
Seeing your doctor regularly is really important. Turns out that a lot of times in medicine, we're really, really good about starting people on medicine, and sometimes we're not as good about stopping people on medicine. So having that discussion with your physician, hey, all these medicines that I take, are these medicines still necessary? Are they still beneficial? Could we deprescribe a little bit? Maybe you're on more blood pressure medicine than you need to be. Yeah. Maybe the medicines that were at one point in your life fairly safe, now that your body has changed, you won't metabolize them as well. So maybe there are safer options to discuss with your physician about. Making sure your pain is taken care of. A really impressive thing I read was that for people with chronic foot pain who see a podiatrist and a therapist, both the risk of falls by about a third, which is really impressive. So making sure you're discussing these things with your physician and following up with them regularly is really good. And that way too, your provider can make sure your blood pressure is well controlled. You're not dropping your blood pressure when you stand up. Along those same lines, make sure you're standing up slowly. I tell a lot of my patients that when you stand up, make sure you stay there for a minute before you start walking, because heaven forbid, if you get dizzy and you're standing next to your chair, you can sit back down. If you start taking a few steps and you get dizzy, unfortunately, you're only going one place, and that's what we're trying to prevent. And the single most important thing really that people can do to their own bodies to help prevent them from falling is exercise. Regular exercise is pretty much the one thing that in study after study says this will really help prevent you from falling. A mixture of strength training and balance training is good. So doing things like yoga and Tai Chi to an appropriate level to your ability really can help reduce your risk of fall. So incorporating exercise into your regular routine is probably the single most important thing you can do to prevent your risk of falling.
Yeah. Yeah, very helpful. What about when do you tell folks or encourage them to think about some sort of aid like a cane or a walker or those type of things, Matt?
Yeah, that is a great question. And the literature on that is really interesting because the mobility aids haven't really shown or reduce a risk of falling. Now, that is always a fully loaded statistic, because if you're going to compare two groups of people, one group of people with mobility aids and another group of people without mobility aids, in general, the people with mobility aids probably have a reason to have them. Meaning they're probably more likely to fall. So despite the fact that the studies kind of don't show that, logic would tell us they really do help. Once people start having gait abnormalities, I'll normally tell them, hey, this is an important thing for us to start to think about. And then what we'll do is we'll have them see one of our physical or occupational therapists or both. And they can fit them for the mobility aid that's right for them. They can teach them how to use it. They can make sure their muscles that they need to use it properly are evaluated. And this has really been shown when you get plugged in with a therapist with the mobility, that does have much better data as far as reducing your risk of falls. So normally when people are expressing to me that they've got some balance issues, they don't feel as steady, it's at least worth an evaluation.
Yeah. Good. So like around the home,
Mm-hmm.
what can folks do? How can they set up their home itself? Let's say they're doing all they can from a standpoint of exercising and the things that you're talking about in terms of controlling their blood pressure and hearing aids and glasses and all those, wearing the right shoes and all those type of things. Around the home, what are some things that you see people or you hear about people doing well or not so well that seem to be common themes in terms of falls?
Sure, another great question. Really for people in their homes, I have seen and had patients fall in every single room of their home and outside the home as well, but certainly in the home is the most common place. So I really recommend to people that you go room by room. There are some overall kind of ideas to have, like for example, good lighting is really important, particularly in stairways and hallways, because those are the parts that sometimes we neglect. So making sure that everything is well lit when you take the stairs or when you're in the hallway, that'll help you see anything that's in your way. So obviously that is a good place to start. Making sure that on those stairways, in those hallways, in the living rooms, anywhere where there's carpet or rugs, that you don't have loose things. So loose carpets, loose throw rugs are really, really, really a high fall risk. And I have seen many, many people trip over them. So getting rid of those where you can, or making sure that any carpet you have is secure and is firm, is really, really an important thing. Then the next place that I always think about is the bathroom. The bathroom is probably the one room in the house anecdotally that I see more patients falling in than any other room.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of reasons for this, right? One, we tend to have slippery surfaces in our bathrooms. We have bathroom tiles, there's a shower, things get wet. When they get wet, we're more prone to falling. The other thing too that isn't always as fun to talk about, but when we go to the bathroom, we use the bathroom, right? We have bowel movements in particular, which can make our blood pressure drop, give us a condition called orthostasis, where when we stand up from that, our blood pressure drops really quickly and we pass out. And I've seen that happen many, many times. Along those same lines, the shower, when you're in the bathroom, not only is it wet, not only is it slippery, but on top of it, we take hot showers. Well, hot showers can lead to vasodilation, can lead to lower blood pressure, and can lead to us passing out and falling down. So doing things in the bathroom, like making sure you're adding good handles, good grips where places where you might be trying to get in and out of the tub, making sure you have good non-slip rugs are really, really important. Making sure you're taking your time when you get up off the toilet, that you say, okay, I've kind of got my bearings there. That's
Mm-hmm.
an important thing as well. Making sure that if needed, you have things like a shower chair if needed, so you're not standing there and just having to stand in the shower as you get more fatigued, and also as you have the hot shower. That's probably the number one place I recommend that people start with. Bedrooms are also important. That's kind of where I go next with my patients. And bedrooms and living rooms have some of the same kind of general concepts that I recommend to people. Making sure you don't have small and low furniture, things like coffee tables, magazine racks, which is funny. I know people with magazine racks, but nobody reads magazines anymore, to my knowledge. But we have trouble getting rid of that stuff, right?
Right.
I tell my patients, anything that really hits lower than your knee, I am worried about, because it's stuff that's harder to see. You don't take a corner quite right. Next thing you know,
Yep.
you're tripping over it. Heaven forbid you're falling into it. Those are good things to look for. Along those same lines of the bedroom, leaving a nightlight on. People think nightlight for children, but believe it or not, it can help with adults too, especially because when we get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, we don't always take our time, right? We're kind of in a hurry. We want to spring out of bed. So then we've got multiple problems, right? We're getting up quicker than what we would recommend it. So you might have your blood pressure drop. You're a little groggy from the fact that you just woke up.
Right.
And on top of it, a lot of times you can't see because it's dark in your bedroom. So a nightlight can at least help with one of those places. That can, or one of those things that can kind of make you fall. Making sure your furniture is fairly easy to get in and out of. Getting into it's normally the easy part, but getting out of it's important. If it's tough to get out of, you can fall while you're trying to stand up. Normally I tell people in kitchens are the next thing I think about. Making sure that things are within reach, not extending really far outside of your body. That's when we tend to have balance problems. Getting one of those sticks that helps you grab things up on the high shelf really, really can help.
Mm-hmm.
Sure that we're cleaning up spills when we're in the kitchen. If you can, and you're preparing a meal sitting down can help. If you're over a hot stove and you're standing for a long time, again, you're getting fatigued and you're getting warmer, so you're going to vasodilate. You're going to have that problem potentially with your blood pressure dropping and falling. And the last thing is kind of an overall home thing. It doesn't really fit into any room, but making sure you know where your pets are. I have had many patients.
Yeah.
And I think this comes into vision and hearing as well. If you don't hear them as well, you don't see them as well. But knowing where your pets are is really important. I have probably, after falls in the bathroom, the next most common thing I've seen in my practice is people tripping over their pets. 'Cause, the pets love us. They want to be right there underfoot, and they don't know that we don't always see them, and we can trip over them. Last place I go is probably the outside. Making sure you've got good handrails. If you have a stairway, and this is inside and outside, 2 handrails is really better than 1. If you are locking your front door, often making sure you have something to hold on to while you're locking your front door, because anytime we're holding things in our hands, we can get more distracted, or again, we're out from our body, so we can have balance problems. So if we have a handrail to hold on to, that really can reduce it outside in the front door as well. And then making sure our lawns are free of clutter, that really can help as well.
Yeah. Speaking of outside the home, the other one that I think about when I was in practice was there are a lot of people that fell on Sunday mornings.
Oh yeah.
In church.
Yeah.
You want to talk about that a little bit, and what's kind of, from your perspective, what's going on in that type of situation?
Yeah, outside the home, I think church is probably the number one place that I see.
Yeah.
Normally syncopal episodes too, right? I mean, it's a lot of the same concepts, just in a different location. So when you're in church and you're standing up all the time, well, again, anytime you stand up, your blood pressure can drop. Churches sometimes can tend to be a little bit warm anytime we're in with a crowd a little bit more. We're letting our guard down. People tend to be happy, right, when they're going in church. They're socializing with everybody, so you're not really maybe paying as close of attention to where you're walking. You're trying to socialize. We sing in church. Anytime you're really trying to project, you can get syncope from that as well. You get that head rush that anytime anybody's yelled at anybody, they've experienced that before. Well, it's kind of the same thing when we sing. And so the other thing too is some of our churches are older buildings, right? So they don't have quite as many accessibility things as what we would like. The stairwells can be a little bit more narrow. The carpet can sometimes be loose. There can be steeper stairs, things like that. But I will agree with you, Bill. Church is one place I see a whole lot of people fall down and pass out sometimes. Yeah.
I always wondered too, like, some part of it too is like if you have some bladder issues and you don't want to have them during church, you may not drink as much as you normally would in the morning. So you go to church, so you stand up and your blood pressure drops, and that kind of seems like that's been something that I've heard people talk about too.
Yeah, absolutely. That is a great thought. The things people do that they think are, going to be okay, like not drinking enough water, that then you pay the penalty for later.
Yeah, for sure. So, let's see. Lucille said, yeah. So Lucille had a dog that tripped him.
Absolutely. Yeah. It is common. They don't mean any harm, but dogs can sometimes just get so excited.
Yeah, right. And they're on a leash, or if they're not. If they're not, either way, they go all of a sudden they go flying by, and there you go. So
absolutely.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Wolf, for taking the time to talk about falls. There's a lot, like, I like what you said about, like, it's not like typically just one thing. It's kind of a number of things that can add up to the moment when someone takes a fall. And then once that happens, once someone has fallen, you hope that they bounce back and do really well, but it's concerning in terms of the statistics once folks begin to fall.
Yeah. And I do normally recommend as well, because the falls are so dangerous. It's not really I'm a believer that an ounce of prevention is worth a whole bunch of pounds of cure. But for people at fall risk, I do normally recommend some sort of fall alert device as well.
Okay.
Or the bracelet. Just because the data on people who fall and can't get up, not to be cliche with the old commercial.
Yeah, right.
But people who fall and lay there for a long time, they get so many complications just from lying there, that anything we can do to prevent that individual from having to lie there for a long time is at least something we can do to prevent some of the complications. Although I do encourage my patients to make sure to push that button if you have one when you need it, because there is some evidence about people who fall down, have an alert bracelet, but they don't want to bother anybody. But please, if you fall down and can't get up, please hit the button if you have one.
Right. Well, I think that's a good point to end on. So, Dr. Wolf, thank you for your time and your expertise, and I'll let you get back to what you're doing, seeing patients today.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Bird. Appreciate it.
All right. Bye. Okay. Very good. All right. Well, I have a few other items I want to share with all of you before we let you go. First of all, I want to congratulate Whitney Smith, our Employee of the Month for the month of July. So congratulations to Whitney. At one point in time, Whitney works in the main clinic. At one point in time, she worked over in the Morrison Clinic. So I know Whitney well. She is very deserving of this award. And also, speaking of deserving, Amy Coots, who works at our birthing center, if you get a chance to read this newspaper article about a 3-year-old over in Dixon that had essentially a drowning event in a pool that she resuscitated. Wow. So glad that she was able to be available. And also, one of the things we do at CGH is we ask all of our clinical staff to have what's called basic life support training on a regular basis. And so she was able to utilize that training to help out with that 3-year-old. So thank you for what she did in that situation. Also want to congratulate our summer scholars. We have students every summer who are interested in getting into the medical field, in some way, shape, or form spend some time here at CGH. And I want to just thank our summer scholars for this previous year, this past summer, who just finished what they were doing. So thank you to them. And also, we had a number of students who helped our CGH auxiliary with volunteer activities. I think we had 12 of them. I think we have another page. Yes. So thank you to all these young folks who we have been seeing around the hospital helping out with volunteer activities. Been very helpful and very nice to have those fresh young faces around. Blood drives continue to happen and continue to need folks who are willing to give. So I want to highlight that blood drive that'll be happening in August. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to talking with Dr. Hanlon and Dr. Thormeyer about robotic joint replacement surgery, which is happening at CGH. And so really, really cool stuff. And in our area, in a community hospital, I'm very proud to say that we are performing these surgeries for patients here at our community hospital in Sterling. So we're going to have a nice conversation with the two of them, and they can talk about their experience using the robot for patients. That's all I have for you today. Thanks for taking the time to tune in, and we will see you back in August to talk about robotic surgery. Thanks.